Hello everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing a film called The Invitation, and this is directed by a woman named Karin Kazama. She's only directed a handful of movies in her career, including Girl Fight, Aeon Flux, which I wasn't a huge fan of, and then more recently Jennifer's Body in 2009, that's a movie that was really slammed by audiences and critics, and I actually like the movie. I think people should give it a second chance. I think that she showed a lot of promise in that movie by taking a kind of dark comedy slash horror film, or horror-y, if you will. To me, it really examined adolescence, sexuality, and social conventions through the filter of a slasher genre. And it wasn't a great movie by any means, but I really saw potential in it. But Kazama's latest film, The Invitation, to me takes all of those hints of potential that you see in Jennifer's Body and just brings them up to a whole nother level. I mean, the amount of improvement, the sophistication in it is astounding. The story revolves around a guy named Will, and he looks kind of like a crossbreed between Tom Hardy and Father John Misty. Will is definitely the outsider, the quiet observer in the movie. He always feels slightly out of place. He's got kind of a very kind of scraggly look to him, very hipster-like compared to these kind of clean-shaven LA types in the rest of the movie. He and his girlfriend Kira are both invited to a dinner party that is going to be thrown by his ex-wife and her new husband, along with a lot of old friends. And naturally, Will is quite uncomfortable by this idea because he hasn't seen his ex-wife in 2 years. He is the protagonist, so naturally we as the audience look at him as somebody who's supposed to represent us, and we're seeing this dinner party unfold and all of the different character dynamics around him through his eyes. Will is constantly on edge in this party, always thinking that something is a bit off, something is not quite right, particularly with his ex-wife, who appears to be kind of strange. She wears this long white kind of bohemian gown, and she seems to be full of all of these kind of spiritual epiphanies, and she's almost like this glowing goddess. But at certain points, they're very unexpected. She has these very strange slips, like these snaps of completely irrational behavior that is very perplexing. But what we don't realize early on is that these characters have this very dark, intertwining story that brings them all together for this special occasion. Will and his ex-wife both had something very tragic, very traumatic happen to them that has caused their marriage to fall apart. And both of them have kind of tried to wipe the slate clean, in a sense, tried to start over after such painful circumstances. And that's kind of the question that the movie is proposing, I think, to the audience, is like, can you truly move on from a dark past in a healthy way, or does that darkness kind of consume you and haunt you until the day that you die? What is the balance there, or is there a balance depending on the person? I think that this film is brilliant in many ways. It's a very layered, very intricate study of our very cynical and often very artificial society, and how the artifice of those social conventions can not only bury a lot of the darkness underneath, but they can also contribute to the darkness that's going on underneath everything. Kazama does a fantastic job of capturing that, particularly in terms of the visual style of it. It's so mature and so creative, and she has a lot of very Hitchcockian, kind of modern day Hitchcockian sensibilities. And just like any great psychological thriller, you never feel at ease while you're watching the film because so much of the frame is kind of, it's hidden from the audience's perspective. You only see what Kazama wants you to see. She often withholds information throughout the film, which causes the viewer to kind of question their own ability to perceive what's going on. And that's important because, again, you are seeing much of the film through Will's eyes. You're not really sure what's going on in his head. What is he really seeing as reality, and what could be in his mind? And a lot of this is conveyed through all kinds of different things, lots of blurred imagery, close-up shots, very slow zooms to kind of build that boiling tension. And I could go on all day about just the way that this film is shot, and honestly, I would love to see it again, maybe 1 or 2 more times, just so I can really analyze the technique into how they were able to create such magnetic tension. But ultimately, for me, what is most resonant is the kind of the emotional questions that the film poses, and you know, that comes mostly from the characters. And these characters, all of them are just so interesting to me, so complex, because you learn more and more about them as the film goes on. They all have very complicated relationships and backstories, and there are other things that are more hidden that don't come up until maybe the third act of the film. Even though the film is very grim, very unsettling, I did definitely see Kazama's humor poke through in it, because the whole dinner party is basically like a comedy of manners in the beginning. It's very satirical. The acting is very, you know, actory. It's very superficial, seemingly. Lots of very forced adult conversation, awkward laughter, and just very trite attempts at humor. But that's a key element to the story. You need to see those social norms in a very blatant light in order for them to be peeled away bit by bit. And that's where so much of the tension comes from. Personally, you know, very kind of posh, superficial dinner parties really kind of gross me out. So I love the idea of taking these superficial norms and just making these people feel more and more uncomfortable and forcing them to confront things that they don't want to confront. And ultimately, I think this movie is a symbol of those conflicts in society, how we constantly try to rise from these mistakes that we have in our past, all these past troubles, but society often deals with these problems in ways that aren't very healthy. We try to either cover them up completely, or we try to seek very clear paths that have already been paved for us. And I'm not going to give away too much, because I think with this movie, the less you know, the better. While I do find credence to some of the ideas that are posed midway through the movie, at the same time, I think there's that line that can't be crossed. You can't wipe away who you were, because who you were and the things that did happen to you help build who you are. Towards the second half of the movie is where I start to have problems with it. The film at the beginning builds so cleverly, and it's just so engaging, and the second half of the film really did suffer from so many of the things that films suffer from, which is, of course, you know, that third act that really lacks that palpable dimension. It's really hard to create that, and I thought they could have gone about the ending of the film in a less conventional way. But having said that, because the emotional questions in the film are posed to, you know, us as viewers and also to the characters, I think the ending does have impact, because we get to see these characters grow with the questions that are posed. We get to see some characters who either choose to overcome those problems, or people that have ultimately become victims to that pain, and it's sad to watch. It was all worth it for me because of the final shot in the movie. It is a breathtaking image, and it reminded me a lot of the ending, the final shot in It Follows. I know I mentioned that in my review for that film, which came out last year, but it's just this symbol of our society and how our world is slowly disintegrating, but there is that slight hint of hope and that hint of love and support there. But I honestly think that this is such a great movie, so entertaining and so well built, and it also has depth to it. Anyone who's a major cinephile appreciates film and really likes films that are very kind of Hitchcocky and psychological thrillers will love this movie. And that's my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below, and you can also like my Facebook page and the link below that one. Catch you next time.